So anyway, so that's kind of brought Stoic ideas and techniques into the health sector, into like general practice, and because now you can get it on the NHS. You can go to the NHS and go to see one of these 3,000 therapists, and they'll teach you these kind of Stoic ideas and techniques. And we're also seeing these kind of Stoic ideas and techniques in the education sector. The British government has got interested in the last 3 or 4 years in the role that emotions play in child's development and in education. And particularly the way that negative emotions like depression or anger can block a child's development and get in the way of them learning and interacting and progressing in society. So they've started to look at how we can teach people in schools, children, to manage their emotions, to manage their emotional responses. And the two main ways they're doing that, one is a class called Social and Emotional Aspects of Learning that was introduced about 3 years ago. And the other is a pilot scheme developed by Penn University and by Aaron Beck and a guy called Martin Seligman, which is called the resilience training thing. And they're doing a pilot scheme in that in about 3 schools in Britain. And if it has good results, they're going to roll it out across the whole of Britain. Now, both those schemes rely on the ABC model that Ellis took from Epictetus. So really Stoicism is right at the center of efforts to teach children how to manage their emotions in Britain. Now another sector where we're seeing Stoic ideas and Stoic techniques being rolled out by governments is in the military. We've seen, for example, in the US, the Department of Veteran Affairs has, I think, spent about $100 million on providing CBT for soldiers coming back from the front with post-traumatic stress disorder. And the military has also been looking at what they can teach soldiers to stop them getting traumatized in the first place, how they can teach them to be resilient, to cope with the traumatic events that they're going to experience. And really, I mean, the first person to do this is Thomas Jarrett, who was teaching a resilience training course in Iraq in 2005. Before anyone else was really doing it, using these ideas and applying them in the field. And unlike most of these other things, the difference with Thomas was he actually mentioned Stoicism. He didn't hide it. It was the same with Ellis. Ellis was always open about where he took his ideas from. But a lot of the other later things, particularly from Penn, they emphasize that this is a new science rather than an old philosophy. They've rarely mentioned Stoicism. I was the first person to get Aaron Beck to admit that he took his ideas from Stoicism. He'd never really mentioned it before.
Yes, I noticed that I've been through his book and I was wondering why he
he mentioned Socrates, but he doesn't really mention like Epictetus.
If I may, the book was called The Resilience Factor, written by Karen Rivich. The book they're using for the Master Resiliency Training Program, and actually nowhere in the book is there a reference to Ellis, ABC, or Stoic. And I actually mentioned it to Ellis when he was alive, and he said, you got to understand, it's another form of flattery. And I mentioned that to Dr. Seligman. I said, I can't understand. Here's this ABC. In fact, it was called ABC. And he kind of quickly said, but I referenced it, a bit of and then I wasn't contacted for a few years after that. I think I had referenced some others. But it is important to be honest to one's roots. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. So I was shocked by that as well. So there's this famous book by Karen Rivich called The Resilience Factor.
Exactly.
She's from the Penn Psychology Department, which has been really important in this kind of cognitive therapy. And it's all about using the ABC technique. And she not only did she never mention Stoicism, she never even mentioned Albert Ellis, who was the guy who,
she does in the MRT course very small footnotes. That's the original work of Dr. Ellis. Very small script.
So this has given a bit of an overview of this new, what I call politics of well-being. Is that a wolf?
Yes.
Okay.
It's an Akira.
That's great. Announcing So we've seen it in schools.
Karen Rivich.
So schools, hospitals, the military, also in prisons in terms of anger management courses. So there's all these different kinds of fusion of Stoic ideas and techniques with modern psychotherapy and with politics. Now, in my last little third of this, I want to look at some of the ethical questions that are raised by this. I've been the last about 3 or 4 years, I've been writing about this in magazines and newspapers, writing about the relationship between Stoicism and CBT, because it seems so fascinating to me that modern psychotherapy takes so much from this ancient philosophy. And I couldn't understand why no one else was writing about this. I mean, this is just like such a rich area to write about. So, I mean, so I went and interviewed people like Albert Ellis and Beck and Martin Seligman and, you know, some of the philosophers as well who, you know, the philosophers caught on later, people like Martha Nussbaum, they kind of worked out the connection between ancient philosophy and cognitive therapy, and they've started writing about it as well in the last kind of couple of years. And the response I got from these articles I've been writing the last 2 years or so, from philosophers, was to say, well, you know, it's all very well talking about the similarities between Stoicism and CBT, but don't forget, you know, there are big differences. These are quite different things. And the main thing they say is that Stoicism was a complete moral system aimed at the moral transformation of an individual and the cultivation of virtue, while CBT is just something you go to for a few weeks and it relieves certain symptoms, and it's not trying to make you virtuous or moral, it's just trying to make you happy, trying to make you feel good. I want to just read a little example of this kind of response. This is a British magazine called the Philosophers magazine, and this is just from the last month's issue, just came out like a month ago. The cover story is on practical wisdom, philosophy for children, business, therapy, and more. And part of the cover story is called "What Can the Stoics Do for Us?" And we actually get mentioned in this, by the way. It says, there seems to be a thriving Stoic community to be found online, with groups like the New Stoa and the International Stoic Forum, with the Rich Eric set up. You know. So it talks about kind of modern Stoicism, and it says, you know, the Stoics are not short of fans these days. Their ideas frequently pop up in self-help, popular psychology, as well as in all sorts of mainstream publications such as The Guardian, Prospect, and Psychologies. And it talks about the fact that some people have, like me, have compared CBT to Stoicism and showed the link between Stoicism and CBT. And it says, it would be misleading to overstate the similarities, because CBT and REBT, which is what Ellis called his therapy, aim at helping people to overcome troublesome emotions by modifying their beliefs. The ultimate goal is that of relieving clients' distress. Like most other modern psychotherapies, they are hands-off about what clients should value in life. Stoicism, on the other hand, was a radical philosophy that aimed at restructuring the aspiring Stoic's worldview. It was conceived as a kind of therapy for the soul, but it was didactic and moralistic. It is in a way ironic to use Stoic ideas which drastically redefined the good life in the service of a conventional notion of happiness, of an unexamined feeling good. So that's kind of typical of one response. I mean, I've had like other responses, for example, from this book you're reading by Mark Vernon. He responded to an article I wrote saying, this isn't really Stoicism. CBT is like Stoicism light. You know, it's kind of just, it's pick and mix Stoicism, because it's just taking a few techniques but not signing up to the whole system. And the editor of this magazine, Julian Baggini, wrote an article saying he was very worried about how kind of positive psychology and CBT was looting ancient philosophy. This was the word he used, looting it. Looting. A bit like, you know, like it was like Indiana Jones running into a temple and stealing like kind of Inca statue and wrenching it from its context and then running away with it. So, you know, because he said, you know...
we mentioned early Christianity at the same time.
Right, yeah. He was saying that they're taking these techniques but hollowed out of all their moral context, you know, so it's just kind of caramelized feeling goodness rather than this stern, you know, proper fundamental Stoicism, which is like no messing around.